and Homecoming Office. We're pleased to begin this conversation to urging us to explore and share this history more broadly. Before we get started, I'd like to review a few housekeeping items so that you can participate more fully in today's program. As you can see, there is a chat option at the bottom of your screen on your control panel. There's also a Q&A button as part of that. And since you're in webinar mode, your audio and your video are disabled. So you can test out the chat, as some folks may have seen already on the screen here. I've asked if you could submit maybe your name, where you're tuning in from, your relationship with Hopkins, and perhaps your graduating year if you're an alum. So the discussion portion of today's session will last about 40 minutes. I will ask our panelists a variety of questions, and they'll share their thoughts and experiences. And if you have questions for our speakers, I'd ask that you submit them in the Q&A button, through the Q&A button on your screen during the discussion. I'll ask those questions to our panelists at the end when the presentation is complete. And I'd also add today that if we experience any disruptions, the host will take appropriate measures to fix those problems, which may mean the audio and video will be temporarily muted. But hopefully we'll have a successful and uninterrupted presentation. So I'd also just like to add that you'll be seeing some images today through a shared PowerPoint. A lot of the images are from, actually all of the images are from the Diverse Sexuality and Gender Alliance, or DSAGA Collection, which is available through the university archives. In ordinary times, these records would be accessible to researchers and could be viewed in the Special Collections Reading Room at the Brody Learning Commons. If you have any questions about donating material, or you would like to maybe get in touch with us about your own archival records, photographs, stuff from your time at Hopkins, please feel free to reach out to me directly. My email is listed here, and it will appear again at the end of the presentation. So now I'd like to introduce you to today's presenters. Professor Bill Leslie is here with us today, alumna Isabella Alter, Sabrina Scarborough, and Dr. Carl Street Jr. So to start, I'm actually going to hand it over to Bill for a few minutes, who I'll ask to introduce himself and then also share some insights from his own archival research, just to get our discussion started today.
Well, good afternoon. This is Bill Leslie. I'm a historian in the Department of History of Science, Technology, and Medicine, and I've been asked to write a new history of Johns Hopkins. And in the course of researching and writing that history, LGBTQ issues come up more than I might have suspected. And I just wanted to give you two quick examples from recent research. During a class this spring, we talked about John Money and the Gender Identity Clinic, because that's an important part of Hopkins history. Although it's a controversial part, it was then and is now. We owe money, of course, for terms like sexual orientation and gender identity, and the clinic itself, which performed the first reassignment surgeries in the US, although it didn't perform that many. So I was trying to come up with an assignment for undergraduates that would inspire them to think about this more critically. And I'll just read it to you because I got such a wonderful response from the freshmen. These are all freshmen who know very little. But here was the assignment. I said, since 1970, the Arcus Foundation has given $200 million to support civil rights and social justice for the LGBTQ community. Founder and President John Stryker inherited his fortune from his father's medical supply company and is seeking to endow a major clinic to share the goals of his foundation. So the Johns Hopkins Center for Transgender Health opened in 2018, is looking for a named donor. And you, as Dean of Medicine, Paul Rothman, would like Stryker to consider making a gift. So you have to write a letter to Stryker, convincing him to fund the Center for Transgender Health, and then respond as Stryker. So the students did a remarkable job, and they gave a great pitch as Paul Rothman, and then I wrote back as John Arcus, suggesting, that whether I would or would not fund the clinic. The only problem with the assignment is they didn't realize that the letterhead that I'd stolen and the signature I forged were not actually John Arcus. And so I was a little concerned that they might write back and say, thank you for supporting this. But it was a very interesting experiment, and I learned a lot from it. And I was surprised at the creativity of that assignment. The other thing I wanted to share is Eliot Coleman. And Eliot Coleman was the founder of the writing seminars back in 1946. He was a poet, and he spent his entire academic career at Johns Hopkins. And the very last poem that he wrote before his death was called Four Counties of Youth. And because it's the last poem, and I'll read you just the last part of the last stanza, it reminds us just how important LGBTQ issues are and the difficulties that our faculty sometimes had with expressing what they wanted to say, and the fact that he waited till the very end of his life to publish this poem. So I'll just read a bit of it. He says, "Youth over, I went to New York City. I loved Manhattan Island. I loved my job. I loved my flat, and I loved my Freudian psychoanalysis. I found I had been a gay through all the counties of youth without admitting it or believing it. Before analysis was over, I had experienced 200 homosexual encounters on Manhattan Island without catching a sexual disease or meeting a lover. World War II came. I tried to enlist in the US Navy and was rejected for bad eyesight. New York was a nowhere. Another job flashed from another city, parentheses, Johns Hopkins. It was a straight city. I went there and tried to be straight. Then, in love with my new job, I gave up sex for years and was elected to Who's Who in America." And there it ends. And a fascinating insight to really a remarkable man who, at the very end of his life, is acknowledging who he actually is. So I'll leave you with that, and thank Allison for organizing this, and thanking our panelists for participating. And I look forward to hearing what you all have to say. And I'm glad it's being recorded for history so I can borrow from your insights. Thanks.
Thanks, Bill. I really appreciate that, and it's always fun to hear some of Coleman's poetry. So thank you. Let's see here. We'll just skip a little ahead to see some more images. I'd love to start our panel by allowing our speakers to introduce themselves a little bit more fully and explain what their relationship to the university is. We're going to start today, I think we'll go alphabetically by last name. So Isabella, you can get us started off.
Hi, I'm Isabella Alter. I'm coming to you from Baltimore City, and I'm originally from New York City, but I live here full time now. I graduated last year from the Krieger School of Arts and Sciences, and during my time there as a classics major and a museum studies minor, I served on the DSAGA board for 3 years, spending 2 years as a co-president of DSAGA. DSAGA, as I think we're going to go into, was what Gala turned into later on. So it's the same organization. And I'm excited to kind of share my perspective on DSAGA on campus and the undergraduate experience now.
Thanks. So now I'll hand it over to Sabrina.
Hey everyone, I'm Sabrina. I am coming to you live from Fells Point here in Baltimore City. I'm looking out over the harbor right now, which is really super cool. I'm a lesbian. I identify also as a cross-dresser. My pronouns are any. I get called sir as much as I get called ma'am. I don't really like either of them. I kind of like Dr. Street, that we all have non-gendered pronouns. That would be nice. And I come out under the transgender umbrella as a sense of solidarity to the trans community. Been with Hopkins for 23 years. I worked for 20 years with the School of Education, and now I'm at the School of Nursing. Been there for 3 years. And I'm also I'm about to start my last semester of the Master of Liberal Arts program with advanced academic programs at Krieger School of Arts and Sciences. So, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Thanks. And then Dr. Street.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for organizing this. Everybody can call me Carl. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm a graduate of the School of Medicine in 2013, and then I stayed at Johns Hopkins Bayview for my internal medicine residency and left in 2016. I am coming to you from Boston, where I did my fellowship and have joined the faculty at Boston University, where I am the research lead for our Center for Transgender Medicine and Surgery, and can definitely talk about how I found myself here thanks to Hopkins. So looking forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. So the first question that I have for you all is, before arriving at Hopkins, whether it was for school or for work, did you know anything about the LGBTQ community here? And did you get a sense that this history was sort of shared or talked about at all? And maybe I'll toss it to Sabrina just to start, since you have a little bit more length of time here, but then we can go and everyone can respond.
Sounds good. I will say that growing up in Baltimore, I didn't have a lot of knowledge of the LGBTQ community, especially at Hopkins. I was I grew up in Harford County, and I just didn't really get down to Hopkins very often. Right before I started to work at Hopkins, I was in the military. I was actually in the first class of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. So it was this, in the application, there was a big X over the "Are you a homosexual?" question. And so I was in that class, and I ended up hurting my knee, and I'm a disabled vet now, but when I got out, I was like, well, there's really no reason for me to be in the closet anymore. I started school at University of Maryland, College Park, and I got a job at an HIV/AIDS clinic in DC. And at that point, like once you worked in the community, you were just assumed to be part of the community. Especially, this was 1995 to 97, 94 to 97. And I didn't really know that much about Hopkins. I loved my time at I was at Whitman Walker Clinic in DC, and I loved my time there. When I got to the point that the commute from Baltimore was killing me, I decided that I wanted to either get a job in Baltimore that would pay for my education or move to DC. And I kind of threw everything up to fate. And I applied at Hopkins, and I came out in the interview process. It was 1997, so this was either the year that Ellen came out, or I can't remember if it was 96 or 97, but it was a really big deal to walk into an interview and be like, hey, yeah, I'm a lesbian. Not a lot of people were that out. I was hired, though, and I took that as a really big step for Hopkins. And I felt like over the years that I've been very supportive. I've very supported, and I also feel like that says something about where the university was at that time, and especially considering, in '99, that's when the same-sex domestic partner benefits came into effect. And I also knew when I got hired, the non-discrimination clause included sexual orientation. So all of those things made me, kind of gave me warm fuzzies. And so I felt like pretty quickly I felt welcome here. I can't say that it's all been rainbows and butterflies. I mean, there's been some moments here and there, but I do feel like the university treated me great over the years. So.
Isabella or Carl?
I can take this. So I quite honestly did less research than one might think, but I checked off that box that said, oh yes, this school does have some kind of group for like queer people. But a lot of the research that I actually did regarding like a school choice was about the city, and when I was moving from high school, where I really couldn't be out to college, I wanted to be able to experience more of that kind of community. And so I found, oh, cute coffee shops, this place called Red Emma's, that sounds awesome. Let me go here. And so that was really part of my experience before I arrived at Hopkins. And then I will say that after I arrived at Hopkins, I really quickly started going to DSAGA meetings and going to the LGBTQ Life office. And then I really started to kind of understand that there was a group of people on campus.
Pretty much similar for me in terms of when I was applying for medical school. I was definitely out in my application. I had taken time between undergrad at University of Chicago, where I had done a lot of LGBTQ student activism and advocacy, and then worked at Howard Brown in Chicago, which is very similar to Chase Brexton in Baltimore, so an LGBTQ focused health center. So I had some idea that I wanted my career to be informed by LGBTQ issues, not necessarily that I was certain that that was the trajectory I was going, but I was open in my application. I mean, honestly, if I tried to go back in the closet, it would have appeared like I had done nothing for years. So when I did apply, I remember distinctly during one of my interviews, the physician who was interviewing me, Dr. Richard Zellers, who's now at Indiana University, was very upfront and said, like, you can be out here. This is an institution where I can vouch for there being a network of people who can make sure that you are professionally safe in being out. And that was, for me, that stood out because there were definitely a lot of institutions that did not, were not as upfront about that opportunity, and some of them that very much discouraged it. Naturally, some places were outright rejections, other places definitely uncomfortable interviews. But Hopkins was a little different in that there was somebody who wanted to vouch for, saying that there was a community here. I remember when I came back for second look, Dr. Zellers had actually arranged for me to meet with Dr. Joel Gallant, who is like a leader in HIV and LGBTQ health issues, as well as the leader of the student group, the Gertrude Stein Society at that time, which is the LGBTQ focused society for the School of Medicine, Nursing, and Public Health. So Hopkins upfront was very explicit in that there were people that could be supportive. I would agree with Sabrina that it's not all rainbows and unicorns and butterflies in terms of how that actually played out over my training. There were definitely a lot of different confrontations in my time, but I would say that Hopkins had a lot of good roots to work off of in terms of ensuring that there was LGBTQ focused support for students, faculty, and staff, as well as ensuring that we were training people to be competent and compassionate providers for LGBTQ folks.
Thank you guys very much. So the other sort of question with that is, I'm sort of curious about your connections to the LGBTQ community, specifically at Hopkins. So if you could talk about that, and maybe more broadly in Baltimore, how you sort of interact with that community there. Do you support, or did you support any specific organizations? And I guess maybe we'll go in reverse order and we can start with Carl this time.
Yeah, so I probably took about a year during medical school to kind of get a feel for it. Like, I'm back in school, what does it mean to be a graduate student, as it were? And then I got more involved with the Gertrude Stein Society. It's our LGBTQ focused group. It's named after Gertrude Stein because she was, in fact, a medical student back in the day. And as a out person in history, it made sense to have a group named after her. And Gertrude Stein Society had been around at least since the 80s, and as far back as I could trace it through prior leadership. And my involvement was kind of revamping that organization, kind of revitalizing it, ensuring that there was leadership from the School of Nursing and Public Health so that it wasn't dependent on any one student, and trying to make sure that there was some structural integrity in terms of it being passed on year from year. A lot of the stuff I had done with other students, like George Hahn at the School of Public Health or Alex Holmes at the School of Nursing, we really focused on ensuring that Hopkins updated some institutional policies. We made sure that insurance removed exclusions for trans specific health care. And then we started really trying to focus on health education. There were a number of curriculum committees at the School of Medicine, Nursing, and Public Health that came from Gertrude Stein Society, or at least had a representation from that. So we really tried to inform that. I would say there's a number of folks at the School of Public Health who led to the development of the current LGBTQ health focused certificate there. And then It's been great to see it continue on, and it's been great to see actually more faculty members feel comfortable being out and having this be an additional part of their mentorship role. Dr. Neil Naff, who's a neurosurgeon at Johns Hopkins and also an alum, has been a remarkable support for folks over the years, and has been one of my mentors when I was at Hopkins as well. So it's been great to see that community kind of strengthen. It was there before, and I think it's become more robust as time has gone by. I'll pass it to Sabrina next.
Well, for me, I've been involved in I've been a member of many of the groups, Gertrude Stein, the network, DSAGA, like paying attention to what everyone's doing, but not really being a part of the group. Back in the 90s, I did some things, happy hours, that sort of thing. But I work full time. I'm in school. I'm a part-time musician, and then I have stepsons too. So I've got a lot going on, and I don't have a lot of time outside of work hours to do a lot of the things that I would love to do. I do present, I'm a facilitator for the Safe Zone training. I've been doing that since the Office of LGBTQ Life started back in 2013. It's something that I do a lot of. I try to do, I guess, I'm probably do one at least every other month, sometimes more than that. But and then on top of it, since 2013, I've also been presenting at the Diversity Leadership Conference. I do either trans inclusion or trans awareness. I felt like as a lesbian back in the early 2010s, I felt undereducated for the trans community. So and I'm a part of the community, and I felt like if I were undereducated, then what was everybody else like? So I really became just more aware and more involved in the trans community, and it was at that time that I started really paying attention to my own gender identity, and realizing that I don't want line up the way that society thinks that I should, even though I was born female, I identify as a girl, my gender expression is completely masculine, but I'm also very comfortable with my feminine energy. So I like the combination of both, and I felt like with that, I can really understand the trans community a lot better than I ever did before. And so being involved in the DLC and then the Safe Zone facilitating, I've even done some trans workshops privately, like in churches. We've done them for departments that have had employees transitioning. And then on top of it too, I've always been involved in diversity for the schools that I work for, whether that's either the School of Education or the School of Nursing. At the School of Education, I always felt like I was the one at the table that was going, heteronormative, cisgender, gendered, language, like looking at that and trying to bring it to the table. But then at the School of Nursing, I've actually been involved in some of the discussions about curriculum and making sure that we're paying attention to what language that we're using in curriculum. Because as a student, I've been in classes that I felt left out of. If somebody's showing a PowerPoint and they show a picture of a half-dressed woman, and they're like, all the guys in the class, you really like this, but all you girls, and it flips to some muscular guy, and feeling very unseen by something like that. And that's happened a few times over the years for me in class, like just either having heteronormative or cisgender, bias. And so working on that in curriculum, I know that one of the questions later is what about the future? But even now, I think that really recognizing our biases and being able to get that out of curriculum is important. So that's what I do.
Okay, so I'm next. As I said before, I was on the board of DSAGA, the Diverse Sexuality and Gender Alliance, for 3 years. And being a part of that group wasn't just, I think, the way that I contributed most, but it really was one of the most important parts of my undergrad experience. I could go into, the various things that I learned from it, but I hope that, and it's only been a year, but I hope that I was able to make a contribution to the group. But regardless, I think it was a really interesting 3 years that I was on the board, to be able to see what the role of DSAGA is at this time, because it's changing, and it has changed since the opening of the LGBTQ Life office, which happened before I started on the board. But I think we were still in that adjustment phase right as I came on. There were still vestiges of duties that we had done before the opening of the office. There was, I'm forgetting the name of it, but DSAGA was a big part of organizing an interscholastic conference in the city prior to the LGBTQ Life Office. I don't think that conference exists anymore, but it was in our bylaws still that was part of the group's duties. And so it had been ongoing when I joined the board, but as a co-president, one of the things that we had to start doing more carefully was looking at how we needed to change our bylaws to better fit what the group was actually doing, which I think was really important for that time. And but the interesting thing, of course, is that a lot of the things that DSAGA was doing, as exemplified in these documents, is pretty much the same. I didn't get bingo or DSAGA-O, but only because I can't lick my nose. But some of the things like trips to city, we didn't go to City Cafe, but we went to Red Emma's. Group trips, study groups, things like that still remain. And so there's kind of this history of the group, which was really fantastic to be a part of during my time.
Thank you all for that. Yeah, I think it's really interesting to see the different advertisements for events, and it's just a little treasure trove of archival records. So one pretty big thing on the timeline of LGBTQ history at Hopkins was the creation and the launch of the Outlist, which happened in 2011. So I was wondering if any of you would want to elaborate on that, basically what it is, what its goals are, and I know it's still in existence, and I believe that in some ways it's probably a really helpful tool for this community. So if y'all could speak on that, maybe we'll start with Sabrina.
Sure. The Outlist is basically a list. It's an online list of people in the LGBTQ community that are willing to be out and named on a list. And it's kind of a mentor program. It's also just available for people to reach out to you if they need someone to talk to, a wide variety of things. I went to the launch of the Outlist back in 2011, and it was a really big deal at the time. And I mean, I think it still is a big deal. I mean, my name's on there. I try to make sure my information's updated. We talk about it in every safe zone, and I have had people, contact me over the years for, medical students that want to talk about how to be more inclusive, and make sure that they're not, you know, that they're asking questions appropriately, that sort of thing. And, you know, maybe any, one of the things that's come up for me is a few either like doctors or MPs have contacted me and ask what type of healthcare problems that I've had, or, you know, positive things, negative things, that sort of thing. So I mean, it's out there. I like having my name on it. I think it's a big deal to show somewhere that there are people. I mean, not everyone, you know, coming to Hopkins knows exactly who they are and where they're going and what they're going to be doing. So I think it's important to show some type of representation. And honestly, I mean, I cried at the event. You know, all of these steps, being, you know, I'm 49 years old, and I've been around the block a few times. So all of these things, you have these moments where you go, wow, you know, this is a part of history. I mean, just right now, all of us sitting here, we're a part of history because, you know, this pandemic and doing alumni weekend online, I mean, this is something that will be talked about forever. I mean, not necessarily this particular workshop, but this moment in time. And that's kind of what the outlets felt like to me. It felt like this moment in time that I was being a part of something that was historic. So it's pretty cool. Thanks.
And I know, Carl, you were on campus when this happened, I think, right? So
Yeah, so this was actually something that Dr. Clever and I created. So we were part of that initial group with other students. And Dr. Sarah Clever, who at the time was in the Office of Student Affairs at the School of Medicine, had really championed as one of the faculty members. And honestly, once we got President Daniels on board, it was smooth sailing from there. But it was definitely something we'd been advocating for a few years because we'd seen it at other institutions. And as Sabrina very well characterizes, as a public list, it really provides for organic opportunities for mentorship to say like, oh, there's a faculty member who's in my field or my interest area, and I have a chance to reach out to them. When we had the public launching, that was on National Coming Out Day in 2011. And it was a big event. I remember, if I remember correctly, we had like rainbow balloons. It was a big deal because it was using the public space at the School of Medicine, which, as a microcosm of the U.S., definitely had people of different opinions and different thoughts on what should be done. And this was Hopkins and the president really standing behind, saying we believe this is a value to our students, staff, and faculty. I would say within the first few years, there were a lot of, I don't want to say a lot, I mean, I can distinctly think of at least 3 or 4 people who were in the closet during training and came out because the outlets, they're like, I could find a faculty mentor who could talk me through what needs to be done. And we're talking in fields that are stereotyped as not welcoming, such as surgery and a few other surgical specialties. So the outlet continues to serve a great purpose in terms of demonstrating that you can be out in the professions. I think there was some unique challenges, though, to setting it up because most of it is public. It's not all public in terms of what details are available about people. Since we wanted to make sure that all parts of the Hopkins community could be on it, the School of Public Health definitely had some concerns because we have a number of faculty members who work internationally in areas where it is physically not safe necessarily to be out, but they wanted to somehow be a resource. So we had to find at that time, and I'm honestly not sure how it may have evolved, but at that time we had to find ways for which you couldn't just in Google search somebody's name and say Hopkins Out List or name and LGBT, that you could in fact find them in the list, but you could not do a targeted search. It was Hopkins, I think it was a really good compromise to allow people to be available as mentors while trying to safeguard them in some pretty hostile places in the world.
Isabella, is there anything you want to add about that as a resource? Or
I mean, I did look at it in my freshman year, and I remember thinking, wow, this is really exciting that it exists. So that's kind of the impact it had on me.
Thanks. So another more recent historical moment, which is something I think has really brought about a lot of support on campus, is the creation of the LGBTQ Life Office in 2012. So do you guys recall the changes that this office helped implement, which I know, Sabrina, you talked about the safe space training, which is a huge one. And then more specifically, did this office impact your experience at Hopkins? And I guess let's do reverse graduation order. So we'll start with Isabella first.
So yes, it definitely impacted my experience. I spent almost every finals period after my sophomore spring, like hanging out during open hours in the office. And it not only, I think, was a space for, being present with other people, but it was also a great resource for me, specifically Demery was a great resource for me as a student leader, and kind of combining, how do I support my peers with how do I support myself? And I think everything would have been entirely different. Looking at DSAGA specifically as an organization, the opening of the LGBTQ Life Office really changed the role of DSAGA, because DSAGA used to have its own small office in Levering. They would answer phones. They would provide kind of some of that help that was coming from every angle. Like, I am a student, I don't know how to come out. And it obviously was very important, and that kind of history of queer people supporting other queer people in the process of coming out is, I think, a really important part of LGBTQ history. But it's still a lot for a student to do, to provide that kind of emotional support. And so I think when the office opened, it meant that DSAGA didn't have to provide that role on campus, and was able to do other things like different programs and get more involved with other campus movements as well, and work with other campus leaders.
Yeah, I would definitely echo that. I think the biggest change from having the research center is that that students were given the freedom to not necessarily focus on what was most, I would consider, basic needs in terms of ensuring safe spaces, ensuring that staff and faculty are up to speed on basic LGBTQ issues. So Sabrina and I were the ones, as a part of the larger group on the Diversity Leadership Council, that drafted the proposal for this center. And Demery Woolway has taken it in every which way that we hoped for, and then some. Because I think the biggest thing that we all struggled, while we, I think, learned a lot and gained a lot of skills in being advocates on the ground, it definitely can be an unexpected added burden or expectation to students, when we definitely felt this is something that belongs within the staff or faculty realm. And the proposal for the center, while housed on the undergrad campus, has served significant needs across all of the Hopkins institutes. So I don't think I have much more to add other than what Isabella said. It's great to hear that this really freed up the opportunity to think more creatively and address issues a little bit quicker on the ground.
Yeah, I love hearing both of you on that. The Office of LGBTQ Life and Demery are very near and dear to my heart, and I think the Safe Zone training throughout Johns Hopkins, both the university and even parts of the hospital, it's really changed the dynamics. I think a lot of people have been reached that would have never had the opportunity to participate in something like that. And there's so many other things, all the groups, the events that DSAGA does, all the meetups, the peer counseling. I mean, I just feel like things have exploded. Like there's a group for almost anything that you could want for, and I love that. It kind of makes my heart smile. And then on top of it, I know that all of this led to, you know, walking in the first Pride parade. And even though I'm a musician and every year I have to play on Pride, and I've never been able to walk in the Pride parade, it was a really big deal to have Hopkins there. And I know that Demery was a part of that. And then on top of it, there's things that they're involved in behind the scenes that so many people don't know about. You know, chosen name field in JED being added. That's something that they worked hard to do. So trans people, and then you know, anyone. If you know, my first name is Mary, but I go by Sabrina. So you know, being able to put that out there somewhere, being able to have you know, a field that people can actually call you by your name. And then bathrooms. The bathroom list is a really big deal to someone like me. I've been harassed so many times over bathrooms. I scare little old women and little girls, and it's horrible. It makes me uncomfortable. It makes them uncomfortable. I've had people run behind me, screaming at me, saying, "Sir, sir, sir, that's the women's room," and I'm not even in the bathroom yet. So being able to find a safe place to just go to the bathroom on campus is a really big deal. And I know that Demery's pushed very hard to have you know, restrooms available. I know that myself at the School of Nursing, we're building a new building. Well, we're adding an addition, and having an all gender restroom right at the front entrance is such a big deal to me, because I think it gives a nod to the trans community. I think it you know, it really gives a message that that Johns Hopkins, you know, is moving it forward. So all those things. I mean, they're you know, insurance, including you know, the gender confirmation surgery on insurance, being able to have top bottom insurance coverage. All of that is just such a big deal. And LGBTQ life and other places in Hopkins really did a lot for that. So I just want to, you know, throw that out there, that it's so much more than just, you know, the groups. There's a lot behind the scenes. So thanks. I'll stop now.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate all of your thoughtful responses. We are, you know, tight on time, as we often are in these things, but there is one question that I really wanted to get to from the prepared questions for you guys about the university archives and how we have a variety of records, including some from DSAGA, which was originally Gala, as you mentioned earlier, Isabella. And these include a variety of things, flyers. This great Gilman condom hunt is one of my favorites. The University Archives has really tried to gain the trust of students and sort of, especially student organizations. And as you mentioned, that's not all that makes history, but I do think it's really important for the University Archives to have that representation of the student experience, rather than just always recording the administration's records and those types of things. You know, the DSAGA collection at the University Archives is just really, really fun, and I think can help tell a more complete history of this. So with that, I'd like to ask if any of you would want to comment on your perspectives and experiences with I think you did already speak a little bit to your experiences with DSAGA, but maybe more broadly, this can be a moment to chat about the importance of preserving queer history and maybe where you see your roles in that, maybe Hopkins's role in that. So I guess maybe I'll toss it to Isabella to start.
So first I want to say that I'm really excited to see all of these documents, and, you know, have them be formally accessioned is really, really important to me, and I know to so many other people. It's also really amazing to see some of these posters, because, you know, they look different, but some of the things are exactly the same. I don't know if everyone knows this, but when I saw the great Gilman condom hunt, I thought back to a time when we did a Hopkins campus scavenger hunt, where the prize at the end was, you know, a goodie bag full of chocolates and also safer sex equipment. And it rained halfway through. which meant that we all had to go back to the room we were meeting in and left these items, just some dental dams, some condoms, some gloves, just on campus in wherever. So I thought that was really funny. You know, things have changed. Obviously the posters look different, but ultimately a lot of what we're trying to do on campus is really similar. And I think that message is really important, especially for people who are going forward. The feminism workshop is not something that necessarily we've done in name, but I know we've certainly partnered with other organizations to do workshops like this one. So it's, you know, really exciting that this gets to be part of the archives.
I would say that I've found history particularly important in terms of understanding what advocacy has been done before and how we can build on that, even though there might not be an immediate memory of that within the student body. So when I came to campus and had the chance to meet with other faculty, learning about what significant events had happened before in terms of making sure students are aware of LGBTQ health issues was really critical in terms of building off of that, since it was a great way to recruit faculty to be part of that. Since I'm like, hey, remember when you did this like a decade ago before I even knew anything like this existed? We're going to try and revamp that. Recently, I've actually had a chance to reach out again to one of the past leaders of the Gertrude Stein Society, Dr. Chris Hall, and he happened to be digging around based on some questions I had sent, and he's actually been connected to Demaray Woolway and is going to be sharing some documents that could then ideally be archived from, if I remember correctly, from the 90s in terms of what was going on with Gertrude Stein Society then. I think having that memory is really important, and it's often why for student groups, it's really important to have faculty be truly committed and invested, because they're going to be the ones who provide that memory over time as students graduate. So I'm happy to see this archive is getting further fleshed out. And I think it'll be a great resource to those 30 years from now.
Yeah, for me, looking at the slideshow, seeing the Allegro pop up, I mean, queer bars were so important to me when I was young and in the closet and afraid to be, you know, truly who I am, who I was. So, you know, seeing those things, and I also, you know, I love history. So, and we only hear about, you know, white heterosexual Christian, you know, cisgender history for the most part. So I think that anywhere that we can keep queer history, you know, it's important. So I love all this. It's great.
Thank you, guys. So I want to leave time for a question from the audience. So I'm just going to close with one more question for you guys. So what do you think still needs to be done at Hopkins, and where are there opportunities for improvement? And also, just because specifically today's conversation, are there ways that you see that alumni can support the LGBTQ community at Hopkins? And maybe, you know, what would you imagine would help this community be even stronger? I'll go to Carl first.
I mean, one of my general asks at this point is not necessarily just for Hopkins, but I think Hopkins has reason to be a leader in this, is that LGBTQ health education and training should not be determined on where you go to medical school. Whether you end up becoming a compassionate and competent provider shouldn't depend on where you went to school. So I've been asking all schools, and especially been pushing leaders like Hopkins to make this a requirement across our training, and that our specialty, that our residencies and that our fellowships tailor it to the specialty as well. I think that would go a long way in terms of making it clear that we are providing care for everyone, but also making it clear that you can be a member of these communities and be in this profession as well. Because I think when we do appropriate training, it creates a more welcoming environment and vice versa. I think in terms of improving the community across Hopkins, I think we've already done a very good job. I think it's a matter of making that more routinized and standardized, and that that Hopkins continues to lead in some way around that. I'm admittedly not exactly sure what that's going to look like. I have not had the chance to get back to the campus in some time, being up here, and unfortunately didn't get a chance this year because of what's going on. But I'm optimistic that our efforts, especially under Demery Woolway and others, will lead the charge in some way across our peer institutions.
I I agree completely with Carl that you know, we need to continue doing what we're doing. I also think that you know, we need more cultural competency across the board in all aspects. I said earlier about the curriculum. I really, that is near and dear to my heart, making sure that, you know, we're staying away from you know, things that exclude people. But then you know, living in Baltimore City, I mean, I wish that we had a safe zone at Johns Hopkins on race. I wish that we had a safe zone on all types of things that you know, experience discrimination. So you know, these, I think that this is just one area that we need to continue to improve on. I wish that we could, you know, push it a little further, and yeah, I'll just leave it at that. I know we're a little short on time, so thanks.
Yeah, so definitely echoing Sabrina, what you said about, you know, broader diversity. But I also want to, you know, there are still professors who, you know, share things that are inappropriate and discriminatory and terrible, even if they purport to be better than that. Additionally, as far as what alumni can do to support current students is listen to what the student groups are saying and what the students are doing. There's a lot of on-campus movements right now that are really important and are connected to this history. You know, the protests against ROTC, very kind of early on into DSAGA's history, and then, you know, directly connect to protests against private police and the you know, organizing about uncovering grades for freshmen was really important in my first 2 years at Hopkins. So, you know, as far as what alumni can do, definitely keep abreast of what's going on campus right now, and specifically looking at what the student groups are doing.
Thanks, Isabella. That's great. And I do have information a little bit, I think we'll, on a slide a little later on, about how to sign up for the LGBTQ newsletter. So that is a way that you can stay in touch and get updated on some of the issues that are going on. We did have one question that came into the Q&As, which I'd love to get to now that we're in our last 10 minutes of the event. So I'll just read it. It's a little lengthy, but I think the point is there. So certainly throughout its history, Hopkins and other institutions have both had successes and failings in terms of their obligations to this community. As is often the case, those failings are often perceived by most people at the time as norms or just the uncontroversial status quo. As you reflect on the history of the LGBT community and issues at Hopkins, can you think forward and speculate as to what historians 30 years from now might say were the clear failings on LGBT issues going on today at Hopkins that should have been addressed? Maybe we'll toss it over. Sabrina looks like she's got a visitor, so.
I do. My cat may have some things to say. And yeah, she might be right up on me. I I think that what Isabella was saying, I think that that's the failing that we have right now, that we do have people that think they are aware and woke, for a less of a better word, and they're not. And I think that we have to somehow get at that. I think we have to figure out where the problems are with our faculty, with our staff. I mean, don't even get me started about campus police and their lack of diversity training. So, diversity as far as queer training, but also as far as, sexism and all the other isms and microaggressions. So I think that I think you hit on something perfect, Isabella, in saying, in the classroom, that's a major place that we have to make sure that we're doing better. And I hear it in every school that there are problem children, and then on top of it, it's this idea that they're okay, like the faculty, a faculty member could never have a bias, so I think that that's a major failing, and I thank you for bringing it up. I know at the School of Nursing, it's talked about sometimes about, microaggressions as far as race goes, as far as, binary gender, that sort of thing, and a lot of times I think with especially with medical education, that we get so caught up in male and female problems that we forget that, there are trans people out there, and there are things that we just have to think about. So yeah, that's where I think we're failing right now.
Carl, is there anything you would want to add?
I'll jump in. I'd say oftentimes it's really easy to find where we're failing, and I think trying to imagine 30 years from now what that might be at this moment can be a little counterproductive. I would say what's going well is that Hopkins has rededicated itself to gender affirming care in the form of its center. It has been very active in trying to ensure that there's community input for that. That they are using patient-informed committees to try and tell us what research questions should be done. I think Hopkins, like other institutions like ours at Boston University and our Center for Trans Medicine and Surgery and others in the New England area, have really been trying to ensure that we are moving away from old models of research where it's on populations, and we're trying to make sure that it's with populations, that it's informed, and we also acknowledge that there are members of the communities of interest who are actually experts in the field as well, and making sure that we are highlighting their great work. I think it's too easy to point out what is failing, since we all have a predilection to see that. I think it's really important to highlight what is going well, and I think that's one thing that Hopkins has really done well in terms of doing a 180 and have been highlighting voices across the institution who are now on the right side of history, as opposed to those who may have not been in the past.
So I definitely thank you. I have very little to add to what the other two panelists said, other than I think that there will be a recognition, perhaps 30 years on, that some of the issues that don't appear to be related to LGBTQ issues are, you can't silo problems or failings in that way, and I think that is the thing that's changing in the world moving forward, our perspective of what makes an issue, but I do agree that there is a lot that's going well as well.
All right, well, thank you guys very much. I'm going to move to this slide just to sort of bring us to a close, because I think that's those were all the questions that came in. So what I'm going to do now is just say a few words of gratitude. Everyone, thank you for attending our panel, and thank you for the thoughtful responses from our panelists, Isabella, Sabrina, Carl. I really appreciate you all being here today and sort of sharing your experiences. And I think this is a good note to sort of end on. It's a moment of hope and reflection. And I do think, one of the questions that I wanted to ask was, how do you think Hopkins can share LGBTQ history more prominently? And I think that this is one of those ways. I mean, I think having these conversations, opening these doors, attending the Safe Zone training myself, I went back to my office and told everyone how they had to go and how fantastic it was, and just how enlightening it is to really to make that connection that like this, like you said, Isabella, that this community should not be siloed, and that, you know, we're all sort of part of this history. And it's sort of this age-old phenomenon of separating out women's history versus everyone's history. And, you know, LGBTQ history is our shared history. And I really believe that, you know, by hosting more events like this and having these open conversations, that we can really share that history with everyone more broadly. So thank you guys again for being here today, and extra thanks to Bill Leslie for starting us off with our note of history, and reminding us how far back this history really goes. It's been a pleasure to have you all here today, and I know Carl had to sign off early because he's off to be a doctor. So thank you for that, Carl. As I mentioned before, if you're interested in donating archival material, which, you know, could be your own DSAGA posters, your own photographs, copies of photographs, to the university archives, please feel free to reach out to me. My email address is here. And also just some information about the LGBTQ community on the right here. We have the information about the Pride affinity. They have a great Facebook page where they all stay in touch. And then there is also information about signing up for the LGBTQ Life newsletter, which I find really cool. They've been hosting some really neat virtual events throughout this sort of, I'm not going to say the word unprecedented, during this weird time, because it is really weird to just be seeing everybody virtually, and you know, it's a change for all of us. So the community is there for you, and just reach out if you need anything from them. So I think in closing, I'm just going to wish everyone safety, health, and we appreciate you joining us today. We hope you enjoyed the presentation, and thank you so much. Bye. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thanks, Bill. Thanks, all of you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Elena?
Hi.
Hi. Well, that was good. I guess I should stop the recording.
Yes.